Finally, up next we have The Water Magician, Episode 1. I have to say, this anime looks fantastic. The opening has very nice visuals, has a lot of watercoloring in its visuals. The song is very fitting to the kind of anime that this one is being portrayed as. I do gotta say, it feels a bit campy, the anime, but starts off really well with us getting to see Rio, our protagonist. He basically got isekai'd by Truck-kun, and he opens up with meeting sort of like God, but he calls himself kind of more so a fallen angel, which very interesting. He called himself a fallen angel, as we later find out that he could, well, not necessarily find out, but we have an indication that there's a certain type of creature in this world that you are not supposed to meet, and it's called the Akuma or something like that. And those are supposedly fake fallen angels. Maybe it's related to this person that's portraying himself as God. But what I find really interesting about this anime is, even though it's an isekai, our protagonist isn't your typical hero protagonist that has to get sent to this other world to get rid of the demon lord or anything like that. Basically, he got done in way ahead of schedule for him, and he just wants to have a normal life, just a laid back life essentially. So he asks to be put in a place where he can just lay back and enjoy a comfortable life. And the god appeases him, sends him to this background countryside, gives him the magic of water, and sends him there. As we find out, he starts kind of like exploring a bit of how his magic works. So he calls in water balls, and he sends them as projectiles. He realizes he can make the water shapeshift on its own, and he he then realizes, like, okay, well, at some point I'm gonna have to go, because they basically just handed him kind of like a starting pack with books of the monsters around the area, as well as like plants and herbs that he can find in that area, and also giving him like a stock supply of like 2 months. So within 2 months, he's gonna have to learn how to basically provide for himself. And one of his first tasks that he tried to figure out how to do is how to make fire. And to do so, he tried the typical stick maneuver for that you see in survival series, but it didn't quite pan out for him. So he starts thinking if there's any way that he can use his water to help him. Uh, so he ends up realizing that his water can be broken down based on the molecules and on the atoms and stuff, and he can rearrange those to make water shapeshift into ice. And later he finds out he can make it so that the water can come out hot or cold. So a lot of properties of water that he is exploring early on, which I found really interesting. And also, not a lot of anime try to dive into a whole progress of training and acquiring certain skills, which this one does. He he starts practicing his ice making, and he realizes, okay, well, I don't even have to incantate my magic, because if I imagine it, I can make it become reality. And that's one of the main things that he learned from the god. Also, like, the god kind of told him, listen, magic is all about imagination and practice. So that's what he tends to do. He starts imagining things a lot better. He starts practicing his magic more, and as time goes on, he starts realizing, okay, I'm improving. At first it took him a lot longer to make icicle spears, and the water jets that he was producing were going so slow that it did no damage. It was just like splashing water. And then eventually he's able to produce ice lances at a rapid rate, and then eventually his water jets are are as powerful enough to cut rocks and steel. So I love the progression that we're seeing in the anime, and also like that it's showing us that things require hard work and practice in order to achieve. And then we take those and apply them to his hunting, because he's starting to real as the episode goes on, you see time pass. So now he's at a point where he needs to start gathering his food and herbs and replenish his supply. So he goes out, and his first uh, target was to find more herbs and more stuff. And he encounters a boar, which is like a monster, but it's like the weakest type of monster. Which I do like that, even though it was like the weakest monster, since it was the first monster he encountered, he was still fearful of what it could do. Like to the point he started having flashbacks of his previous life, and how in his previous life he couldn't avoid the truck coming in, but in here he finds the courage enough to overcome that fear, and he jumps out of the way and starts using his his ice magic to, in a creative way, to take it out, like making it slip and then creating a bunch of ice spears that to end up beating the boar. And then afterwards he goes back, keeps practicing some more, and we learn that there's also dragons in this world. So dragons are seen as like ferocious creatures, and if encountered, you have to flee. Even even though, like, for the majority of times, you if you encounter a dragon, you're pretty much done for, because they are strong enough to obliterate cities without breaking a sweat. Uh, so up next, he goes out and encounters his his next opponent, which is an assassin hawk. And this is where we find out that a lot of the monsters can also possess magic. And one of the magics that this assassin hawk can do is like invisible airstrikes. So like using wind magic, he can use it to cut him up. But I love that because of all the practice that we've seen him do up to this point, he's able to use his ice magic to create barriers to protect himself from getting attacked from behind as he's running away from it. And then eventually he's able to use his ice magic to take out the hawk's eye. And the hawk, he didn't end up killing the hawk, but he did end up letting it go. He did end up letting it go, and then encounter it later when it evolved into a higher monster. So there's definitely a higher. I like that there's sort of a evolution period for monsters. Like they can also go and become stronger themselves, not just humans. So I found that really interesting. And then we also have another encounter that he has with the Dullahan, and this one's kind of like interesting because we don't really notice it that it was going to be something important, but later on, on his first encounter with it didn't seem like it was going to lead to anything. And then once we meet him again, he goes and faces it, and it seems like this Dullahan is helping him develop his swordsmanship. And at one point, he ends up handing him a sword and tells him to kind of like practice making it into like a water sword slash ice sword, whatever. And in doing so is the reason why he is able to beat the evolved assassin hawk, as he uses this sword, which we then later find out as Rio encounters an actual dragon that is able to talk to him through telepathy, that this sword is actually special. It belongs to it was the sword of the fairy king. And through this, like, we now have like the sword is of importance, and with the dragon being here, we learn something else about Rio, that he has developed this hidden trait that was only seen like 10,000 years ago, which is the eternal youth trait, which I'm assuming is why he is able to talk to dragons. And I'm assuming this is why dragons are not why the dragon wasn't violent towards him. And Yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed this episode. It ends off in a decent, like, enough cliffhanger with us meeting another person that was in the opening. At the end, he washed ashore, and yeah, I'm excited to see how Rio and this other person kind of bond and see how the dynamic goes. But this episode was really great. I'm giving it a 8 out of 10, and that's gonna be it for this podcast episode. I think if you enjoy what I'm talking about, you should hit the like, the subscribe button, leave a comment, and until next time, bye.